I also believe, and I had a chat with a friend recently about this. I do believe that the pendulum swings, and that even though certain things might be popular now, by the time you as an author gets to querying, it might have swung back in the opposite direction and gone back to
Mhm.
some different thing or some brand new third secret option, which we're yet to find out.
Right? And we just
So
don't
it
know.
kind of we just don't know. So it goes back to my my original thought, which is to just write what feels good for you.
Hello, and welcome to So I Wrote a Book, Now What? Where writers chat about writing. My guest today is Shameez Patel. She is the amazingly talented author behind the Celine trilogy, a fantasy trilogy that is available now. And she also wrote one of my very favorite romance novels that I've read this year called Playing Flirty. It's available now from Forever Pub. We had a really great conversation talking about how she was able to write these 4 books in such a short amount of time, how she got her agent and her publishing deal, and just about everything in between. So I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's get into it. Hi, Shameez. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, what made you decide to write a book?
I think, like most authors, we've always wanted to write a book. I think we've always been obsessed with stories from a very young age. I know it was that way for me. And I think it got to a point where I had so many stories brewing in my mind that I needed to put it on paper to just get rid of it.
Yeah. When did you write your first book?
Well, I wrote my first story when I was a child. I remember writing a story called The Treasures of Zombie Island. And it was probably the start of romantasy at a very young age, but it had nothing to do with zombies. So that was an unusual title choice. My very first full, yeah, my very first full-length novel I wrote, I think I was around 20 years old. The first published, properly, traditionally published novel I wrote was Playing Flirty, and I wrote that during lockdown.
Uh, it kind of has, I can kind of see that. It has a little bit of a lockdowny feel. Um, maybe it was the game aspect of it that made me think that.
I definitely wrote it because I missed hanging out with people, and I think it shows in Rose's little friend circle.
Hmm. When you sat down to write that book, did you outline it before you drafted it, or was the first draft more like a discovery draft?
I think if I'd outlined it, it would have been a much shorter process. I dove right in. I at that point of writing didn't actually have an idea that I would get it published. It was a story I was telling to myself and to a few friends who I was reading with at the time. And I just kept writing and writing what felt good. And a lot of it ended up needing to be cut and reworked and edited within an inch of its life. So I wish I plotted it beforehand, but it was completely organic, if I could say.
Yeah. And did the voice kind of come to you too? The book has a pretty strong voice. Was that there from the first draft, or did that kind of evolve through the many drafts?
That was there right at the beginning. That was Rose. Rose came to me fully formed
I
and
love
she told
Rose.
me exactly what she wanted. Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm biased, but I love her too. So it's nice to hear that others do.
So, how did you know what needed to be edited then?
Oh gosh, that was a really, really difficult process. I sent it to a few friends who were obviously very encouraging, as friends often are, and I thought it was perfect based on that feedback, and sent it out to agents like some, oh my goodness, thinking back, I'm so embarrassed that anyone received that version of it. Obviously, got plenty of rejections, but I was encouraged by a handful of agents that let me know they really loved the idea.
Mm-hmm.
and it was clear that the writing needed work. They didn't say that because they are rarely that direct, but I sort of read between the lines and realized that is what needed work. I then jumped into doing an incredible amount of research just to figure out what exactly is expected in the romance genre and how
Mm-hmm.
to self edit. And going through that whole process, I figured out which scenes needed to stay and go. I would say at least 50% of it, still not there. I then sent it out to more readers, which also helped a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually pitched it to an agent who loved it. And when she read it, she also gave me a bit of feedback to say that she loves everything except, she wonders about this and that, and let me
Mm-hmm.
think about it for a while. And then I edited it again and reworked everything again with a much clearer idea of what I wanted from the story. It was a long, iterative process of finding my feet in romance and writing in general.
Mm-hmm. What are some resources that you found along that way that kind of helped you find those?
I would say there's a book called, just off the top of my head, I think it's called How to Show Not Tell, and then in
Oh,
brackets it
I love
says
that one.
and really get it this time. Or
Yeah,
I
by
might be getting the
Janice
words
Hardy.
confused.
Nope,
Yes, I
it's pretty
found
cool.
that to
That was
be
almost spot on.
it was so insightful because everyone says show don't tell. You get told this information or this guideline over and over, but it as a brand new author, it just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
You read your work and you're like, but I am showing, when you're clearly
Mm-hmm.
not, but you just don't know at that point. So I did find that book really helpful. I also found Romancing the Beat, in terms of story beats. And I think it was Jane Friedman that also had a story beats sheet up. I really just researched quite widely and found what worked for me. Whatever didn't, and it got tossed aside. I also would always encourage authors to just read. So I read a lot
Mm-hmm.
of popular romances and sort of analyzed them in a way. Okay, it's chapter 4 where, they have their first little banter, or by midway they've kissed.
Mm-hmm.
And just tracked a few patterns to see how much can it vary within this genre. Because the one thing about romance, and this is not to simplify it, but readers do have expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
you do want to stick to somewhat of a formula. And that's not to say it's easy, but you don't really want to surprise your readers too much.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of the comfort of reading romance is that you read it knowing kind of what you're going to get. You're going to get a happily ever after, and like these things will be fulfilled along the way. Like there's a comfort in that of like I'm not going to be too surprised here.
Absolutely. And I think it's also so popular because that story structure works. And
Mhm.
if you threw in your low point, midway, or had, shuffled things around, it might not be as impactful.
Mhm. You also write fantasy.
I
Is
do.
that right? Which one did you write first? Did you write the romance first and then the fantasy, or kind of both simultaneously?
I wrote Playing Flirty first, but published the fantasy first.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
after being so incredibly overconfident at the beginning with all my friends' kind words and being rejected so very harshly by these agents, I was terrified of revisiting Playing Flirty because I wasn't ready. I had a bit of rejection sensitivity. And instead
Mhm.
of writing another romance, I just completely flipped genres and decided to write a bit of fantasy, which is my other love.
Mhm.
And the fantasy flowed out of me so easily, and it had the benefit of me already having researched edits. So I was a
Mhm.
much better informed writer when I wrote the fantasy. And I then edited it because I was so determined not to make the same mistakes that I'd made with Playing Flirty. I edited it, and when I sent it out to publishers, it got picked up quite quickly.
Oh, yeah.
and that
Did
gave
you send
me
it
the
right to
confidence.
publishers?
I sent it to an indie press that
Mm-hmm.
had a really wonderful reputation. And after they picked it up, it sort of really helped my confidence, and I was brave enough to revisit playing flirty.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I feel like there really is something to that. It's so hard to go back to a book, even though it deserves it and it deserves your time and your attention and to have its story told. But when you have evolved so much as a writer, it's hard to go back in there and like kind of fix it, you know?
Mhm. It's a lot of patching, a lot of jigsawing. You're shuffling things around, cutting sentences, rewriting bits, but still trying to save that essence of what you loved about it when you first wrote it.
Mm-hmm. And when you submitted to the independent publisher for your fantasy, did you have an agent at that point or no?
I didn't. They took unsolicited manuscripts at the time, and they offered me a deal based on the manuscript that I'd sent them, and I took it. I was so excited. And I still, up to today, I have no regrets. The publisher, Flame Tree Press, has been incredible to work with, and I'm so grateful that they were my first experience in publishing. They were very gentle with me, which I think I needed at the time. And since then, I would say maybe grown a tiny bit tougher. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I got the agent with the romance.
Oh, you've published multiple of the fantasy books.
Hmm. There's three of them. Yeah, it's a completed trilogy for anyone looking.
That's so awesome. So that's a lot. Because when did the first one come out?
The first one, which is called The Last Feather, was published in 2022. The Eternal Shadow, Book 2, in 2023. And then we wrapped everything up in 2024 with The First King. And then obviously playing Flirty in 2025. It has been a very busy few years.
That's a lot. Did you write all those? Like, I can't understand it. How did you write all those books?
It was, I think, with the fantasy world, I wrote, they're actually behind me, for anyone that does watch the video.
Beautiful.
Um, I wrote, after writing The Last Feather and it being picked up, I just continued writing because I was so scared, to be honest, that I would forget the law. There was so much
Mm-hmm.
world building and so many rules in regards to the magic system and so many characters because, as you know, a lot of epic fantasy tends to have these huge casts. And I was terrified that I would be forced to reread my work to refresh my memory because I'm like I said, I'm not great at plotting. And so I don't keep notes very well. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, while everything's fresh, I'm just going to keep writing until the end so that at the very least, when I come back to this in a year or 2 years, the bones are there and I remember what I intended. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I wrote those three books very quickly. It took a long time to edit them to perfection or, as near to perfection as one gets.
Mm-hmm.
But it, it was a bit of a fever dream looking back.
And then, so after you wrote those, is that when you went to revisit playing Flirty?
It did happen simultaneously. So I was
Mm-hmm.
because as you know, publishing is so slow. There are these long periods of just waiting. So even
Mm-hmm.
with The Last Feather being picked up by a publisher, there was I think from the day of signing, they told me it was about 18 months till publication, and for a year I barely heard anything from them, which is the standard. I mean, you're generally
Yeah.
contacted by your publisher about 6 months before publication, if you're lucky. And so for that year, I I wrote the bones for book 2, but I didn't want to focus on it too much because I wanted to see what the edits for book 1 was going to look like. At that
Mm-hmm.
point, never having been professionally edited, I wondered how much an editor might want to change. So I
Mhm.
didn't want to get too stuck on any story. So I wrote the bones the way that I wanted it. And then I went back to playing flirty and played with that a little bit and sent that out to agents. And then there's that wait with the agents. And my agent
Mhm.
ended up, I think after 3 months, I nudged her and I was like, I assume this is a no, which, cool. That's
She
your choice.
had the full for the 3 months.
She had the full.
Mhm.
And I then asked her, I think at that point I was I was still hurt from all the rejections from the very early batch. And I really believed that I'd edited this version the way it was supposed to be edited. I would not
Mhm.
know at that point what else could have been changed because I'd done my research, I'd done the edits, I really did my best with that book. And so I messaged her and I was like, if you have any feedback, I would be open to it. And she
Mhm.
replied saying, I haven't gotten to it yet, but
Oh
I'll
no,
get
because
right
that
on it. I was
happens.
like, oh. Uh, And I think about a week or two later, she messaged me like, we need to have a call. And I was like, oh,
Oh
this is happening. This is actually happening.
yeah.
And that's when she told me she loved it. And she wanted to represent it. And I was obviously over the moon. And we signed on. And then there was that lull again. And I
Mhm.
assume, I mean, my memory deceives me, but I think at that point I was probably sent the edits for The Last Feather. And
Mhm.
so it was just juggling between the two books during the low periods of waiting. There was one period that I remember. I don't remember which book, but I remember with one of the fantasy books, I'd received edits from the editor and
Mhm.
edits from my agent
Oh
at the
no.
same time.
Mm-mm.
And it
Did your
was, I
brain just go?
actually messaged her. It did, because the fantasy is written in third person multi POV. There's,
Mhm.
um, there's a Cassia as a lead, and then Lucas and Lachlan, and sometimes some other characters sort of pop up with their own POVs. And obviously, you've read Playing Flirty. It is first person. It's only Rose. We get to stay in her mind
Mhm.
the entire time, and the two genres are also really different. So I I told my agent that I was going to finish the edits for the fantasy, and then I was gonna need just like a couple days to just clear my brain before jumping into Rose's mindset. And thankfully, everyone was very understanding. And so it worked out. I think there might
Yeah.
have been an instance where I got the POVs a bit confused. And instead of saying I said she and that sort of thing. But
Right.
those were very, very easy to pick up during edits.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that must be so tricky not only to switch between genres, but between those kind of POVs.
It was a lot
Hard
of
to hold
fun
all that.
though, as well.
Yeah. Are you working on anything new right now?
So there is a book two in the Plain Flirty universe, which
Oh, yes. Who
will
is it? Can you say?
it's the
Is
one
it a
that
secret?
it's the I can say it's the one that nobody expects. It's Lincoln, our really, really shy and
Oh.
quiet gamer that joins probably only half the time because of how incredibly socially awkward he is.
I loved so much that that was just mentioned, kind of not like super focused on, but it was mentioned that sometimes he wouldn't come because he has social anxiety, even with his friends. And
Hmm.
I was like, just having that even just like briefly mentioned, I was like, I feel so seen right now. Because that's never a
I'm
friend in
so
the friend
glad.
group is the one that has social anxiety, even with their friends, but it's a thing.
It is a thing, especially with a group of
Hmm.
friends that are very loud and very, very comfortable in their own skin. There's always that one that's like, they don't fully fit in, but they love these people and these people love them. But there's that fear that maybe they don't actually want me here. Maybe I'm just
Hmm.
here by default or I'm here because of how much they love Claire. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really, really wanted to tell Lincoln's story, and I'm glad that I get to.
That's so exciting. Are you still in the drafting process right now?
I am. I'm in the sort of the final stages of the draft, so it is going off to my editor in about a month. And I don't, I'm not 100% sure of the publication date, but we have a cover that will be revealed in due time.
Yay! Oh, I'm so excited. So it's going straight to your editor. Is it not going to go through your agent first?
No, Playing Flirty was sold as a two-book deal, as I already pitched Lincoln's book as part of the pitch.
Nice. Was your submission process good then? It sounds like it ended really good.
It did. I think so. I mean, it it didn't go on submission, obviously, with all my agent projections with the very first messy draft. But once it landed with my agent, Kathy, who has been incredible, she she was very selective about who she'd send it to. And she
Hmm.
told me quite quickly, she was like, I think I'm gonna send it to this editor at Forever. I think she's gonna want this. And I was like, I trust you. Go ahead, do what you need to do. And we
Yeah,
sent it off. And I think it was within, I want to say 4 to 6 weeks.
that's great.
Um, she got back to us and yeah, she started negotiating a deal with Kathy. And at that point, they asked if I had any other books in the universe, which thankfully I had Lincoln like locked and loaded because like I said, I've been wanting to tell his story and they were into it, which
Yeah,
is awesome.
that is awesome. I'm so excited.
I'm so
I
glad.
can't wait to see the cover and read it.
Soon. I believe I'll get to
So,
reveal everything in like a month or so.
yay! Um, when you went into drafting this time, was your process very different, or are you still a discovery drafter?
I still discovery drafted this one. Again, wish that I didn't because it has just because I have to draft it out from beginning to end, and then I have to let it sort of simmer a bit without
Mm-hmm.
me. And it just takes so much time with each revision when I've let it sit and then to revisit it, read the whole thing. I've at least got a process now where after the first draft, I go ahead and read it, and then I create a spreadsheet where I break down each chapter by word count, by scenes, and by timeline, which I found was an
Mm.
issue in Playing Flirty, where I'd make certain time promises in the
Oh,
story and then lose track of time and end up having to just read everything and scan for, time jumps where the 2 days have passed. If it's
right.
Wednesday, did something happen the previous week, Friday? What is
Yeah.
happening? And so this time I was a lot more um, methodical when it came to keeping track of time passing. So I suppose
Mm-hmm.
there's a bit more structure to it this time.
Yeah. A spreadsheet is a good way to do that. I've always kind of thought, because it's so hard to keep track of the time in your head when you're also keeping track of like the plot and the
Hmm.
beats and the characters and everything. It's like it should just happen in its own time when I want it to happen. But I've always kind of thought I should get a calendar that's just for the story, but I've never done it.
That's a
But a
great
spreadsheet is a
idea.
good way
That
to
is
do
a
it.
great
Yeah,
idea.
I think
Oh,
so,
I
but
should do
I've never,
that.
I have not tested it.
I mean, you could technically create a calendar in a spreadsheet very
Yeah,
easily.
that's
That is
true.
an awesome
Yeah,
idea. So it
thank
could all
you.
sort of
I
still
haven't
be in
tried
one
it.
little spreadsheet. Well,
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You could be like a tab.
way to do that. It's also just a nice
Mm-hmm.
visual representation, because at the moment I've got it listed as it's Friday, and then the next one I would say it's Thursday. 6 days have gone by, or whatever. But I think as a
Right.
visual, it would be really nice to have big block calendar.
Yeah, because then you could kind of see it a little bit. I'm kind of a visual person.
Hmm.
I'll what I do instead of just getting a calendar and marking it so I don't have to keep going and looking back is I just keep looking because some of my stories have like timeline differences. So I'll be
Okay.
like
Okay.
looking, what day was it in 2004? But
Okay.
then I
Okay. That is
constantly
quite
look
tricky. Yeah.
look at it. Or
It'd be
like, what
nice to
was the
have a
moon
calendar with
phase?
like, it must be tricky.
Well, because you want to be accurate with what, if you're talking
I
about the moon.
know. I was so hesitant about even giving a year. Um,
Yeah.
because I'm like, am I going to accidentally mention like an iPhone 7? Was it out back then?
Yeah. But I think
You
that's
know.
smart, a really good way to do it too, if the year isn't like, vital to your plot, because then it really becomes
Hmm.
timeless, which is a good thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, that is so exciting. Do you still have
Thank
to write
you.
up all the terrible things that go with it, like the synopsis?
Um, Kind of. So the editor did want a story breakdown from start to end, for obvious reasons, just to see what I'm planning. But she didn't
Mm-hmm.
need it in synopsis form, this very strict 1,000 word
Mm-hmm.
synopsis form. So she was quite happy for me to just give her an outline, which I did in an email. I broke down because I had the spreadsheet by chapter. I could actually just
Mm-hmm.
technically send her that so she could see what would happen in each chapter right to the end before actually having
Mm-hmm.
to read it. So, sort of.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have to give an outline before you wrote the draft? Or when you pitched the second book, was it more of like a blurb type of a thing?
It was more of a blurb.
Mm-hmm.
It did
Has
need
the
a
blurb
proper outline with
shifted?
playing flirty. The
Oh,
blurb's the
really?
same. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
blurb has the concept of the story has stayed the same. Some details have changed as I've refined the story, but the pitch is it's a solid pitch to what I want the story to be, and I don't see that changing.
Mm-hmm. It seems like you have been like writing, 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 writing a lot since you started. Have you ever felt kind of stuck in your writing?
I felt challenged, but not
Mm-hmm.
blocked. So I've definitely felt challenged, especially with this book specifically, because it is the first book where I hadn't had the entire story approved up front. And it was just, there was so much pressure to make sure that it was going to impress the editor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with every other book, it was the case of trying to sell it to them. If they rejected it, whatever, it's not for them. In
Right.
this instant, it needed to live up to playing flirty standard, and it was the first time I was writing in that way. With the fantasy trilogy, even though those books had to live up to the standard of the previous one, they already had the synopsis or the synopses
Mm-hmm.
for book 2 and book 3 before signing on those books. Very detailed 4-page synopses. So it was,
Wow.
every aspect of that story was checked. So there were times drafting Lincoln's book where I felt a bit overwhelmed, knowing that
Mm-hmm.
it's not just for fun anymore. It's very serious. Contracts have been signed.
Yeah. How did you kind of get past that? Because that's a lot to kind of write against.
I don't think I have gotten past it. I think I'm just writing with it. We're just,
Yeah.
just sort of confronting it and knowing that that is the case. But you just have to keep writing like that. It shouldn't take anything away from whether or not I enjoy the story. So as long as I'm enjoying what I'm writing, I'm assuming I'm on the right track. And if there's a problem, we're gonna fix it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so true. I have found that if you're not enjoying it anymore, usually other people won't either.
That's kind of my motto.
Do you have a deadline then for when this book is due or when this draft is due?
Yes. It needs to be in, I'll need to double check, but I think it's mid-June.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And so to
coming up
hit
fast.
that deadline, yeah, it is. To hit that, do you have a word count goal that you try to make every day? How's your process?
So the is draft 0 is done. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
a case of word count because the words are all
Mm,
there. It's just, I'm
mm-hmm.
just refining the story, tweaking a subplot here and there or a backstory, that sort of thing. Um, I don't write by schedule because life just doesn't allow it. I'm a mom
Mm-hmm.
and I have a day job.
Yeah.
So I just write whenever I can. And at the
Mm-hmm.
moment, it's mostly been at night after the kid goes to bed, after the house is shut down. I sort of power up at about 10 p.m. and then just do my best until my eyes start closing.
Yeah. That's so late.
I know, I
What time?
know.
What what time do you get up then? Because you have a kid, so you don't really get to be in charge of that either.
Oh, yeah. Um, on the weekdays, because of school, I get up around, I would say 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's pretty much the same on weekends because that's when her little body clock wakes up anyway.
Yeah, my daughter definitely has a clock that doesn't have anything to do with the normal clock.
Nope. It's actually got everything to do with the sun in her case. Like she rises with the sun.
Oh
I
yeah.
always tell her she's like a chicken.
Yeah, my daughter usually rises before the sun.
Oh no.
But yes, she's a very, very early riser. Um, it's just I am too, so maybe it's just a thing because of that.
I am too. I mean, if I'm not up late writing, generally, I do love a morning.
Hmm. If you were to design your like kind of perfect writing day, would it be more morning writing?
It would absolutely be almost within the structure of a regular working day.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to get up, drop the kid at school, come back home, sort of power up by 8:30, and just power right until it's time to pick her up, get her, come back home, have some lunch, have some playtime, let her do homework, and then carry on doing a bit of a power stint for another 2 or 3 hours until it's, time to prep dinner and do all the nighttime things together.
Mm-hmm.
But that is that is very unlikely at the moment.
Yeah. How do you find the energy then at the end of the day? That's where I struggle. So usually what I do is I wake up ridiculously early so that I'm up before my daughter is also up ridiculously early.
Hmm.
So I have that kind of time to myself because at the end of the day, like my brain is not there. Like how do you find your story at the end of the day when you've like done all the mom things and done all your job things?
It can be quite difficult. I tried the early morning thing because I also think I function quite well in the mornings, but for some reason, as soon as I'm awake, she wakes up. Like it doesn't matter if it's
No.
an hour earlier or 2 hours earlier. It's like she can sense, like, oh, the day has started. It's time. So I find the only way that I can focus is at night. Um, and I think I've just gotten used to it.
Hmm.
So while I used to be very sleepy at night, I think my body has just adjusted. And so I don't get very sleepy anymore until about midnight. I've just
Hmm.
retrained my brain.
Yeah. Is there a certain spot that you write every time or a certain thing that you do that signals to your brain like, okay, it's time? Or is
I'm
it just
I'm
now
actually
kind of the routine?
I'm trying to figure out something that really kickstarts that part of my brain. I haven't yet got it down, but I do always make like a cup of something warm, either a cup of tea or a cup of hot chocolate, decaf
Hmm.
coffee. Generally, I wouldn't go for full caffeine unless
Hmm.
I am running behind on a deadline. I've done it.
Hmm.
It's very unwise, but sometimes necessary. And
Hmm.
then if I feel like I'm in real trouble, there are certain soundtracks that I'll go to just power up, I suppose.
Hmm.
And it
What are
works
they?
quite well with this book. To really get into the right mindset with Lincoln's book, I went for video game soundtracks,
Fun.
and I cannot actually tell you any of the songs' titles because I don't know them. It was
Hmm.
just random soundtracks that I found on Spotify. And I had my headset on and I turned the volume up and I was like, okay, but just thankfully the songs don't have too many lyrics. So it doesn't get
Hmm.
my brain all jumbled with the words. And it really helped me just completely block everything else out and get into Lincoln's head.
Yeah, that's a great that's a great trick. Did you have something similar with Rose but different music?
With Rose, there was less pressure because there were no
Mm-hmm.
deadlines, essentially. Rose, I could write and rewrite and rewrite. The only person putting deadlines on Rose was me,
Hmm.
with wanting to find an agent, but nobody was telling me when it needed to be done. And by the
Hmm.
time it got to edits, it was done. The edits came
Yeah.
back with, changing a comma here, deleting a that over there, and
Hmm.
that was very it was not, in my opinion, very creative, and I didn't need that much mental capacity to do that. I just needed to set aside
Hmm.
time and look at the editor's notes and delete the commas and adjust things as
Hmm.
necessary. um, but in terms of drafting on a deadline, that to sort of have to kickstart your creativity was something that was different.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a very like I need silence to write.
Hmm.
Um, but recently I've started listening to some music when I'm revising because I feel like it
Okay.
gets things moving more. Because sometimes I get stuck because drafting is so quick, right? Like you
Hmm.
go and you get words, and if
Yeah.
you have Scrivener like I do, your little like bar turns green and it's all very
Oh, that's
good.
awesome.
It's all very good feelings, but then revising, you're like thinking so critically about your story and picking it apart that it feels like it doesn't move in the way
And
drafting
it
does.
feels bad because
Yeah, it does.
while revising, it's hard. Like you're deleting and changing sentences, but unless it's very technical things like line level edits, you're not 100% sure whether you're making the story better because
Mm,
who's to
yeah.
say? Storytelling is so subjective. So
Hmm.
I can totally understand that.
Yeah. I recently just did a really big revision on a thriller that I wrote, and I did get to that point of like, did I just make this all worse? It's quite possible that I just made it all so much worse than the last
What do
draft.
you do? What do you do when you
I
have that
started
feel?
listening to music. So I just like
Joseph.
started listening to kind of because it was a thriller, so I would listen to kind of like moody classical music or
Okay.
like white noise that had rain in the background, and I was just like, just keep going.
You're basically
Just
just trying to shush the thoughts.
yeah, basically to
I
just
think you're going to
keep going.
love Lincoln.
Oh yay. I bet. Like even through what I know of him and playing 30, I was like, I think we would get along. I mean, we probably wouldn't hang out in the same room because social anxiety, but I think we would get along.
Yeah, I'll let you know that he would not survive without his noise canceling headset.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited to read it. How did you kind of did you know him as a character from drafting the first one, or have you been surprised in this new draft?
When I first drafted Playing Flirty, there wasn't much of a focus on him. I mean, even in the final draft, you you don't get that much from Lincoln,
Hmm.
and it it was somewhere halfway through the process that I realized I actually love this character and I want more from him. But at the same time, I know that he wouldn't give me any more for Rose because
Hmm.
Rose wouldn't know him that well. As much as she tries, he wouldn't be able to open up to her at this point. And
Hmm.
I knew at that point that I needed to write his story. I needed to see her from his lens and explain why he feels the way that he feels.
Hmm.
And so while I've always known him, I did discover a bit more about him because he's so secretive. I I
Yeah.
like to joke and say I really had to fight with him to get some more information out of him.
I've had characters like that too, where they are kind of like withholding with other people. And I found it really challenging to write. Was it
Hmm.
challenging for you to write?
I think being in his head was really easy because
Hmm.
obviously he's not withholding anything from himself. Whereas with Rose, Rose couldn't read him fully. She had ideas about him,
Hmm.
but knowing what I know now, she knew very little about what was actually
Hmm.
going on in Lincoln's head. She just made some assumptions based on face value. So I think writing him from her point of view was more challenging than writing him from his own point of view.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You write interiority so well, like their inner thoughts. So I'm excited to read Lincoln's. How did you learn that along the way too, or was that a strength you always had in your writing?
Firstly, thank you. That's a very nice thing to say.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think I would like to think that I've always had that as a strength because unfortunately for me, I spend a lot of time in my mind. I think I've got a constant loop of interiority going all the time. But at the same time, I will say that there was one beta reader who, when she read, there were certain passages where she'd mark off and she'd say, I really wish I knew what Rose was thinking at this point.
Mm,
And that was, I didn't always take it because sometimes interiority slows a story down. But
mhm,
there were definitely moments when I realized, oh, I could add more here. Like a reader would want more because I held back sometimes. So
mhm.
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah. Are you gonna have beta readers for Lincoln before you send it off? Or is there
I
time?
don't know that there's time. I think that's the
Yeah.
problem. I think that's the problem. There were some beta readers on the first draft, but it was the messy draft. It was the I haven't even read it after writing it draft. So they
You're so
truly read the
brave.
worst version of it. Oh, they are so brave. But I I would love I would love to have some more eyes on it, but I do think that the timeline might be a bit tricky because I'll probably finish it um maybe 2 weeks before the deadline, and that is expecting a lot,
Mhm.
especially if anyone's going to come back with changes. I don't have time to make it.
Right. Yeah, totally. So then they'll just sit there in your head, and that would be
Hmm.
terrible.
It would be really awful.
Um, yeah. How did you find such trusted beta readers that you would send them the zero draft?
I am a few of my friends have also become authors during this time, and I'll show you mine if you show me yours has
Right?
become a bit of a comfort
Yeah.
for us. So I've read their zero drafts, and I think all being authors and we know what that first draft looks like. We're also
Hmm.
comfortable enough with each other to say, if you see a typo, ignore it. I was writing at
Right.
midnight. I really just want to know, are my characters likable?
Yeah.
Or does the new backstory make sense? So we do ask
Yeah.
each other some really direct questions, which can be helpful. Sometimes the question is, are the vibes right?
Hmm.
Um,
So you're
so
really
it
looking for
it is
big
helpful
picture.
to have them big picture because you cannot look at a line level on a first draft. It is messy. It is not going to be edited. There will be typos. There'll be missed commas because that's not what I'm looking at during my first draft.
Hmm. How will you know when it's done?
How long is a piece of string? I think that's the thing. I there's it's going to get to a point where there is just no more time left. And then
Yeah.
it's going to get thrown at the editor and she's going to have to tell me if it's done.
Right. When you were reworking playing flirty, how did you know that one was ready to kind of like re-query.
So that was after I did all that research and I rewrote it and I let it simmer and I edited it again. And I just couldn't see another way to tell the same story.
Hmm.
So I sent it out to agents, and I'd already at that point known that if any of them have the full, I would be asking them directly for feedback. And I know that the chances of actually receiving feedback is quite low on a rejection,
Hmm.
but I was willing to just try because I, at that point, didn't know what could be wrong. And it's so subjective. In the previous
Hmm.
batch of rejections, I had one agent tell me that the beginning was too slow, that they really
Hmm.
wished we were thrown into game night. And
Hmm.
I then went back and I was like, great, sure, I'll do that. And I rewrote the beginning and threw them into game night and then sent it out. And I got another agent who replied saying, prefer stories to start off a bit slowly. This seemed like I was being thrown into action and I didn't enjoy. I was like, okay, well, I give up. I just, I
I do feel
was like,
like that
obviously
is
I
one
need
of
to.
the I feel like that's a really like divisive thing too, is that some people really do prefer to be thrown right into the action, and then some people really do prefer to have a slower start, to have the before, to have like um the before, their world changes very concretely set up, and it is just really hard to tell who you're sending it to,
I
what they
think
want.
exactly. And I think it was at that exact point that I was like, actually, I need to stop trying to write for somebody else. I need to write the story that feels right for me.
Hmm.
And I I just then rewrote the beginning to what felt better. And it was actually back to the original where,
Yeah.
as you can see, it's Rose in her office with Sean before going to game night.
Hmm. Yeah. And that feels right for like Rose. It feels right for the story.
Does. I think it is a bit chaos to be thrown into game night. There are so many characters. There's so much happening
Yeah.
at that first game night as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just so tricky. Like well, I've had some people tell me that like, the meet cute needs to happen on page one. And then some people are still of the uh theory of like romancing the beat where it comes at like, a certain percentage mark that is not page one at all. And
No,
it's
it's
so
like chapter
tricky.
3 or 4 or something, because
Yeah.
I think Romancing the Beat still has it that you have sort of both characters get introduced in their own separate
Hmm.
lives before you push them together. And
Hmm.
I will say that I feel like modern romances generally throw you in a lot quicker.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not to say it's a good or bad thing. I just think it is a trend at the moment to
Hmm.
get into the action really quickly to grab a reader's attention. Um, I don't know how I feel about it. I think it really depends on the story.
Yeah, it really does. It's so tricky too if you're a querying author thinking about it, because like sometimes you only have 5 pages to send them, right?
Hmm.
So then it's like, does the meet cute need to happen in those 5 pages? Or will they read on? Like it's so hard to know. Like you can't really look at like the new Emily Henry book, for example. Can't really like read
Hmm.
her book um as a newer romance author and be like, these are like things I could do too, because she can kind of
No,
do
she can do
like
anything at this point.
map her own path because
She could leave the first 5 pages blank if she chose to.
she could, and I would eat it up. What does she mean? I love it.
Yes. Oh, it's so mysterious. Uh, I agree. That is a very, very important point to think about. One should actually be looking at all these authors' debuts.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like current debuts, I think is
Hmm.
key too. Yeah.
But I also believe, and I had a chat with a friend recently about this, I do believe that the pendulum swings, and that even though certain things might be popular now, by the time you as an author gets to querying, it might have swung back in the opposite direction and gone back to
Hmm.
some different thing or some brand new third secret option, which we're yet to find out.
Right? And we just
So
don't
it
know.
kind of, we just don't know. So it goes back to my my original thought, which is to just write what feels good for you.
That's very good advice. It's so hard when you get so much conflicting feedback to know what to
It is
do.
it's a bit of that analogy of having too many cooks in the kitchen.
Hmm. Are you gonna stick with romance for a while, or do you think you'll write another fantasy, or do you have another third genre up your sleeve?
I apparently need to spice things up. So I have written a what I'm calling a rom-com mystery. I'm not sure how big of a
Ooh,
genre that is at the moment.
it's gonna be
I've
big.
I've oh, I really hope so. I've written full manuscript. It needs to be edited before I send it to my agent. So she's waiting on that.
Yes,
But obviously, Lincoln takes preference. So I'll probably edit that in July from what it looks like. But that'll be the
that's
next
so
thing
exciting.
that I'll give my full attention to.
Yay! That is so exciting. So I read Once Upon a Crime, I think it's called, the Ally Carter book at Christmas.
Oh,
Um,
it was,
and
no, it was a
yeah,
wonderful
oh
crime
yes,
of the year.
yes, the most
What was
wonderful
it? The
crime of the
most,
year.
I listened to 50% of it and then my library card expired and I
No,
couldn't access it. And
no,
I, firstly, I didn't know that library cards expire. They've never
yeah.
expired before. I called the library and they were like, oh yeah, it's expired. It expires every 3 years, apparently.
Why? That's crazy.
How has this never bothered me before? I don't remember renewing it, but anyway. So I could renew it over the phone, which was great. But then she was like, oh, it's actually going to take like 5 to 7 business days for it to activate on Libby.
No,
And in those 5 to 7 days, the book got returned.
no.
So I am now back on like the waiting list and my
Oh
card still
no,
isn't activated. So I will probably, please don't spoil it for me. I will
I
finish
won't
that book
spoil it.
in a few weeks.
It's delightful by Ally
I
Carter, and
loved,
it's a romance mystery.
I loved the first 50% that I listened to. It was so fun
It's so good.
and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. And then my friend Sarah Fox, she's a cozy mystery writer. She has a romance mystery coming
Hmm.
out next year called Maybe Not a Detective. So I
Ooh,
think that this is kind of a
so
uptick because genre
maybe I'm onto something.
mashups. Yes, I think
Ooh,
you are.
okay,
Yes.
okay. I better get to those edits before I lose like the hype train.
Yeah,
I
I think it's very exciting. I can't wait. Also, those are the two best genres. So why would not they
think so
smash?
too. Exactly. And I've always loved a romantic subplot. So even in my fantasy, it has a very, very strong romantic subplot. It is bordering romantasy, but based on current romantasy novels, I'm not sure it quite meets that standard. So it's just sort of
Hmm.
below romantasy in that way. But the romance is it's a very strong plot point.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for being here
Thank
and
you. I've
sharing
had a great
all
time
of this.
chatting to you.
Is there
Thank
anything else
you.
that you would like to share?
Nothing that comes to mind.
Okay, I've asked you a lot, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really love talking to Shameez, and it honestly kind of shook my world a little bit. After this conversation, I really took to heart what she said to write what you love and to write for you. And I went back to my romance manuscript and rewrote the beginning for the 10 billionth time. to reflect how I like to read romances. So I think it's a good thing to ask yourself, like, are the choices you're making solely based on feedback, or is it based on what your gut feels about your story and what you want your story to be? I really can't wait for everything she has coming in the future. I can't wait to read Lincoln's story, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy this episode, if you could consider rating or writing a review, that would be amazing. See you next time. Bye.